December 26, 1996, 5:52 a.m. A frantic mother dials 911 from her Boulder, Colorado home. Her young daughter is missing. A ransom note has been found. But what happened in those crucial seconds after Patsy Ramsey thought she had hung up the phone would become one of the most analyzed pieces of evidence in American crime history. 3 voices, muffled words, and a conversation that was never supposed to be recorded. This is the story of the JonBenét Ramsey case and the 911 call that changed everything. On that cold December morning, the Ramsey family home on 15th Street became ground zero for what would evolve into one of the most controversial investigations in modern true crime. Patsy Ramsey's voice, trembling with panic, would be captured forever. But it's what came after. What she didn't know was still being recorded, that investigators would spend decades trying to decipher. Before we dive deeper into this investigation, make sure to subscribe to True Crime Vault and hit that notification bell. We unlock the cases that deserve to be remembered, bringing you detailed investigations every single week. Hit that like button if you're interested in cases that challenge everything we think we know about criminal investigations. Your support helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. The 911 call came in at exactly 5:52 a.m. Mountain Time. Boulder Police Dispatch received what appeared to be a straightforward kidnapping report. A mother, hysterical, reporting her daughter missing and a ransom note demanding money. The call lasted approximately 5 minutes and 40 seconds. But it's the final 6 seconds of that call that would become the subject of intense scrutiny, multiple analyses, and conflicting expert opinions that continue to this day. Let me take you back to that morning and the hours that preceded it. The Ramsey family had returned home late the previous evening from a Christmas party at the home of Fleet and Priscilla White, close friends of the family who lived nearby in Boulder. The party had been festive, filled with friends, food, and holiday cheer. JonBenét had been excited, running around with other children, playing and enjoying the celebration. According to multiple witnesses at the party, nothing seemed unusual about the family's behavior that evening. They appeared happy, relaxed, enjoying the holiday season like any other family. According to statements given to police in the days following the tragedy, everyone went to bed shortly after arriving home around 10 p.m. John Ramsey stated he was asleep by that time, exhausted from the holiday activities and preparing mentally for the early morning flight they had planned. Patsy claimed she woke up around 5:30 a.m. to prepare for an early morning trip to their vacation home in Charlevoix, Michigan. They were scheduled to meet John's older children from his previous marriage for a family vacation that had been planned for months. It was meant to be a continuation of their Christmas celebrations, a chance for the entire blended family to spend time together. Patsy said she walked down the spiral staircase from the 3rd floor bedroom where she and John slept. The house was quiet, still dark in the early morning hours. At the bottom of those stairs, spread across 3 steps, she discovered something that would shatter her world and change her life forever. A ransom note. Not a simple message, but a lengthy 3-page letter written on paper from a notepad inside the Ramsey home. The note claimed that a small foreign faction had kidnapped JonBenét and was demanding $118,000 for her safe return, the exact amount of John Ramsey's recent bonus from his company, Access Graphics, where he served as president. According to Patsy's account given to police, she didn't finish reading the entire note. The moment she saw the words about her daughter being kidnapped, panic overtook her. She immediately rushed upstairs to JonBenét's bedroom on the 2nd floor. The bed was empty. Her daughter was gone. The covers were pulled back, but there was no sign of JonBenét. No sign of struggle. Just an empty bed where her daughter should have been sleeping peacefully. Patsy then ran to Burke's room, the victim's older brother who was 9 years old at the time. He appeared to be asleep in his bed, undisturbed by the commotion. She screamed for John, her voice echoing through the large 15-room Tudor-style house. John came running, and Patsy showed him the note. And then, without reading the entire 3 pages, without following the specific instructions in the note that warned against contacting police, she ran back downstairs to the kitchen phone and dialed 911. The official transcript of that call has been public for years, analyzed by countless people, played on television programs, and dissected in forums and documentaries. Patsy's voice is clearly distressed, bordering on hysterical. She tells the dispatcher that her daughter has been kidnapped, that there's a ransom note. The dispatcher, Kim Archuleta, a veteran of the Boulder Police Department's Communications Center, tries to keep Patsy calm, asking basic questions about the child. what she was wearing, when she was last seen. Standard protocol for a kidnapping report. Archuletta's voice remains professional, measured, trying to extract crucial information while keeping the distraught mother focused and coherent. The call proceeds with Patsy becoming increasingly frantic. At one point, you can hear her calling out to her husband, her voice moving away from the phone and then back. The desperation in her voice is palpable, raw, unmistakable. The dispatcher asks if she's read the entire note. Patsy says she's only glanced at it, that she found it on the stairs and immediately went to check on her daughter. Her priority was finding JonBenét, not reading every word of the ransom demand. Archuleta advises her not to touch the note again, preserving it as evidence. This is standard procedure in kidnapping cases. Any physical evidence, especially a ransom note, could contain fingerprints, DNA, or other forensic clues that might identify the perpetrator. She tells Patsy that officers are already being dispatched to the address and should arrive within minutes. The Boulder Police Department was relatively close to the Ramsey home, and multiple units were being sent immediately. Near the end of the call, the dispatcher instructs Patsy to keep her phone line open, to not hang up. Standard procedure in emergency situations is to maintain contact until first responders arrive on scene. This allows dispatchers to provide additional instructions if needed and to maintain a connection to the caller in case the situation changes or becomes more dangerous. But at approximately 5 minutes and 40 seconds into the call, the line appears to go dead. The official transcript shows the call ending at this point. Dispatch assumed Patsy had hung up, likely in her panicked state, perhaps not hearing or processing the instruction to stay on the line. Given her emotional state, this seemed entirely understandable and not particularly suspicious. But here's where the story takes a crucial turn that would reverberate through the investigation for decades. The 911 system in Boulder at that time had a feature that continued recording for several seconds after the caller attempted to disconnect. This was a technical aspect of the phone system, not widely known to the public or even to many law enforcement officers. The equipment was designed this way to capture any final words or sounds that might be relevant to an emergency situation, perhaps a caller hanging up suddenly because of danger, or important information being shouted in the background, or evidence of what was happening at the scene. When Patsy placed the phone back in its cradle, believing she had ended the call and that police were on their way, the line remained open just long enough to capture approximately 6 more seconds of audio. 6 seconds that nobody knew were being recorded. 6 seconds that would become some of the most controversial evidence in the entire case. For years, this detail remained relatively unknown outside of investigative circles. The Boulder Police Department had the enhanced audio in their evidence files, but it wasn't widely publicized in the early stages of the investigation. Investigators were keeping certain details close to the vest, as is common in major criminal investigations. They wanted to preserve some information that only the real perpetrator would know, information that could be used to validate confessions or eliminate false leads. In fact, it wasn't until several years after the murder that the existence of this post-call audio became a significant point of public interest and media coverage. When it finally emerged and became public knowledge, it would spark a firestorm of speculation and debate that continues to this day. Multiple audio experts were brought in to analyze these crucial seconds. The work was painstaking and technically complex. The audio quality was poor, as one might expect from a recording made through telephone equipment in 1996. With the phone placed back in its cradle and voices at a distance from the microphone. The voices were distant from the phone, muffled by distance and interference, overlapping in ways that made individual words difficult to distinguish. Background noise from the house, the acoustics of the room, and the limitations of the recording equipment all contributed to the degraded quality. But several experts claimed they could hear 3 distinct voices, 3 separate voices in a home where, according to the official timeline given by the family, only 2 adults should have been awake and aware of what was happening. This discrepancy would become a central focus of the investigation and a source of endless debate among those following the case. The aerospace engineer and audio expert Paul Ginsberg was one of the first professionals to analyze the enhanced tape. Ginsberg had decades of experience working with degraded audio, having spent much of his career analyzing cockpit voice recorders from plane crashes and enhancing intelligence communications for government agencies. His work had been used in numerous high-profile investigations and court cases, using specialized equipment and techniques typically employed for the most sensitive audio forensic work, equipment that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and required extensive training to operate. Ginsburg isolated and enhanced the background audio from those 6 seconds. His conclusion was striking and would send shockwaves through the investigation. He claimed to hear 3 separate voices: an adult male, an adult female, and a younger male voice. This wasn't a casual observation made after a single listening. Ginsburg used spectral analysis, which breaks down sound into its component frequencies, voice printing technology that identifies unique characteristics of individual voices, and multiple enhancement algorithms to reach his conclusions. He produced detailed reports showing the different frequency patterns and voice characteristics he had identified in the recording. The reports included visual representations of the sound waves, highlighting where he believed different voices could be distinguished. According to Ginsburg's analysis, the adult female voice, presumably Patsy, could be heard saying something that sounded like, "Help me, Jesus. Help me, Jesus." This would be consistent with her distressed state, a prayer or plea during an overwhelming crisis. The repetition suggested someone in extreme emotional distress, calling out to a higher power in a moment of desperation. The adult male voice, presumably John, appeared to say, "We're not speaking to you." The tone seemed firm, directive, possibly angry or frustrated. It didn't sound like someone addressing the dispatcher or talking about the kidnapper. It sounded like someone speaking to another person in the room. And most controversially, a younger voice seemed to say, "What did you find?" or possibly, "What did you do?" The interpretation varied slightly depending on which enhancement technique was used and which expert was listening, but the presence of a younger voice was consistent across multiple analyses. This was the finding that would cause the most problems for the family's narrative. This third voice presented a significant problem for the timeline the Ramsey family had provided to investigators. Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's brother, was 9 years old at the time. Both parents had consistently stated in their initial interviews with police and in subsequent statements over the years that Burke remained asleep in his room throughout the morning chaos, that they hadn't woken him, that he was unaware of what was happening until much later that day. They described making a conscious decision to let him sleep, to shield him from the nightmare unfolding around them. They wanted to protect their surviving child from the trauma and fear of knowing his sister was missing. If a child's voice could indeed be heard on that 911 call, it meant that Burke was awake, downstairs, and present during the immediate aftermath of discovering the ransom note. This would directly contradict what his parents had told police in their first interviews. The question became, why would they lie about such a detail? What possible reason could they have for misrepresenting their son's whereabouts during those crucial early moments? Was it simply a mistake in memory, or was there a more calculated reason for this discrepancy? A second audio expert, Tom Owen, also analyzed the tape independently. Owen was a court-qualified audio and video forensic expert with decades of experience testifying in criminal cases across the United States. His credentials included work on major federal cases, terrorist threat analysis, and numerous high-profile criminal investigations. He had testified in courts in multiple states and had his methodologies accepted by judges as scientifically sound. His findings largely corroborated Ginsburg's analysis. Owen used different enhancement techniques and equipment, approaching the audio from a completely different technical angle, yet he too reported hearing 3 distinct voices in that 6-second window. Owen's analysis went further into the emotional content of what was being said. He conducted what's called a voice stress analysis, examining the emotional content and stress levels in the voices he could identify. This technique analyzes micro-tremors in the voice that indicate stress, deception, or emotional distress. His findings suggested that all 3 voices showed signs of stress, but in different ways. The female voice showed extreme emotional distress, consistent with someone in a state of panic or crisis. The stress markers were off the charts, indicating genuine terror and desperation. The male voice showed what Owen characterized as controlled anger or frustration, someone trying to maintain composure while experiencing intense emotions. This suggested someone who was upset but trying to manage the situation, trying to maintain control. The younger voice showed confusion or uncertainty, perhaps a child trying to understand what was happening around them. not fully comprehending the severity of the situation. The implications were profound and potentially case-changing. If Burke was indeed awake and downstairs, why had the parents consistently stated otherwise? What reason would they have to lie about such a seemingly minor detail? What were they trying to hide or protect? Investigators began to wonder if this small inconsistency might be connected to larger questions about what happened that night and in those early morning hours. In homicide investigations, especially those occurring inside a family home, even minor inconsistencies in statements can indicate larger deceptions or attempts to control the narrative. It's important to understand the context of why this matters so deeply to criminal investigators. In any investigation, especially one involving a death inside a home with only family members present, investigators pay extremely close attention to the statements given by those present. The first accounts given to police are considered particularly important because they're provided before people have time to coordinate stories, consult with attorneys, or think through implications. These initial statements are often the most truthful because they're given in the immediate aftermath, before people have had time to construct careful narratives or realize what might be incriminating. Inconsistencies, even small ones, can indicate deception, faulty memory, or attempts to conceal information. The question of who was awake, who knew what, and when they knew it, becomes crucial in establishing a timeline and understanding the sequence of events. Every detail matters because it helps investigators piece together what happened in those critical hours. A single discrepancy can unravel an entire story or lead investigators down new paths of inquiry that might ultimately solve the case. The Boulder Police Department, already facing intense criticism for their handling of the crime scene and early investigation, now had another piece of evidence that didn't align with the family's account. The crime scene had been contaminated almost immediately, with friends and family members invited into the house walking through rooms, potentially disturbing evidence. The police had failed to secure the basement where JonBenét's body would later be found. These mistakes had been widely reported and had damaged the department's credibility. Now, with this audio evidence suggesting the family hadn't been entirely truthful from the beginning, detectives wanted to know exactly what was said in those 6 seconds and who was saying it. They wanted to understand why the family's version of events didn't match what appeared to be on that recording. They began to see this as potentially significant evidence of consciousness of guilt, a legal term referring to behavior that indicates someone knows they've done something wrong. Why lie about Burke being awake unless there was something to hide? However, analyzing audio of this nature is not an exact science, despite what television crime shows might suggest. Sound waves can be interpreted differently depending on the enhancement techniques used, the equipment employed, the training and experience of the analyst, and even the subjective hearing and interpretation of the individual doing the analysis. What one expert hears as, "What did you find?" Another might hear as background noise or something entirely different. This subjectivity has been a persistent challenge in audio forensics and has led to significant debates within the scientific community about the reliability and admissibility of such evidence. A third expert brought in by the Ramsey family's legal team disputed the findings entirely. This expert, whose analysis was commissioned and paid for by the defense, claimed that the audio was too degraded, too muffled, and too ambiguous to make any definitive determination about what was being said or even how many voices were present. This expert suggested that what others were hearing as a third voice might be audio artifacts created by the enhancement process itself, or background noise from the house, or even echoes and distortions inherent in the telephone system and recording equipment. The expert explained in technical detail that when you enhance audio, you're essentially amplifying all sounds, including background noise, electronic interference, and random acoustic phenomena. The process of enhancement itself can create sounds that weren't actually present in the original recording. The human brain is wired to find patterns, even in random noise. This is a well-documented psychological phenomenon called pareidolia, the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random or ambiguous stimuli. This is why people can see faces in clouds or hear words in static or backwards in music recordings. The expert argued that the other analysts were falling victim to this tendency, hearing words where none existed because they were looking for them, because they expected to hear something significant, because the case was so high profile and the pressure to find evidence was so intense. The expert suggested that if you played the same audio to someone without telling them what they were supposed to hear, They likely wouldn't identify any distinct words or even be certain about how many voices were present. This created a situation where the evidence was simultaneously compelling and inconclusive. Prosecutors knew they couldn't rely solely on disputed audio evidence to build a case. Defense attorneys would tear apart the analysis in court, bringing in their own experts to contradict every finding. The scientific community itself is divided on the reliability of audio enhancement and voice identification, especially in poor quality recordings. Courts have sometimes excluded such evidence as being more prejudicial than probative, meaning it might unfairly influence a jury without actually proving anything concrete. But let's examine what we do know for certain, what isn't disputed by any party involved. We know that Patsy Ramsey made the 911 call at 5:52 a.m. on December 26, 1996. We know that the call lasted approximately 5 minutes and 40 seconds before the line went dead from Patsy's end. We know that the Boulder 911 system continued recording for several additional seconds after the caller hung up. This is documented fact, verified by phone company records and police documentation. The recording exists and has been preserved as evidence according to proper chain of custody procedures. We also know that multiple audio experts, working independently with different equipment and methodologies, reported hearing similar patterns in that post-call audio. While their exact interpretations of the words varied slightly, the consistency in reporting 3 distinct voices from multiple experts cannot be entirely dismissed or written off as coincidence. In forensic science, when multiple independent analyses using different methodologies reach similar conclusions, it adds weight to the findings, even if they're not definitive enough to prove something beyond reasonable doubt. The recording itself exists in multiple forms. It's been preserved as evidence and has been analyzed numerous times over the years using increasingly sophisticated technology. The Boulder Police Department has maintained custody of the original recording, ensuring chain of evidence integrity so that it could potentially be used in court if charges were ever filed. Various copies and enhanced versions exist, having been created by different experts using different methodologies. Each version tells slightly different stories depending on how the audio was processed and what techniques were applied, what frequencies were enhanced, what background noise was filtered out. Years later, Burke Ramsey himself would address this issue directly in a way that would both answer and raise questions. In a 2016 interview with Dr. Phil McGraw, broadcast on national television to millions of viewers, Burke admitted that he was actually awake that morning. This admission came nearly 20 years after the murder, after decades of maintaining that he had slept through the entire ordeal. He stated that after his mother discovered the ransom note and chaos erupted in the house, he had gotten out of bed. He described hearing commotion, his mother's screams echoing through the house, and deciding to investigate what was happening. Burke told Dr. Phil that he pretended to be asleep when his mother checked on him, keeping his eyes closed and staying still. Then, after she left his room, he got up and tried to see what was happening downstairs. He said he stayed mostly out of sight, watching from doorways and the top of stairs, trying to understand what was going on without making his presence known. He claimed he didn't fully understand what was happening, didn't know his sister was missing or possibly in danger. According to Burke, he was trying to stay out of the way while the adults dealt with whatever crisis was unfolding. He characterized his behavior as typical for a curious child who knows something serious is happening but doesn't want to get in trouble for being out of bed. This admission, coming 2 decades after the crime, confirmed what the audio experts had suggested all along. There was indeed a third person awake and present in those crucial early moments. Burke's own words validated the technical analysis that had identified a younger male voice on that recording. But Burke's explanation raised more questions than it answered. Why pretend to be asleep when your mother checks on you? Why had the parents maintained for years that Burke slept through everything? And what exactly did Burke see or hear that morning that he hasn't fully shared? What does he remember that he's not saying? The enhanced 911 audio became a key focus of the 1999 grand jury investigation into JonBenét's death. The grand jury, composed of 12 citizens from the Boulder community who were selected through the standard jury selection process, heard months of testimony and reviewed thousands of pages of evidence. Grand jury proceedings are secretive by law, designed to allow witnesses to testify freely without fear of public scrutiny or retaliation. They were allowed to hear the enhanced audio and review the expert analyses in detail. Multiple experts testified about their findings, explaining their methodologies and conclusions in technical detail. The grand jury members could listen to the recording themselves multiple times, forming their own opinions about what they heard. While the grand jury proceedings remain largely sealed by law, with transcripts locked away in court vaults, we know some crucial facts about what happened. They voted to indict both John and Patsy Ramsey, though not for murder directly. The indictment, which wasn't made public until 2013, when a judge ordered its release following a lawsuit, charged them with child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime. The specific charges were 2 counts each, permitting a child to be unreasonably placed in a situation which posed a threat of injury to the child's life or health, which resulted in death, and rendering assistance to a person with intent to hinder, delay, and prevent the discovery, detention, apprehension, prosecution, conviction, and punishment of such person for the commission of a crime. The charges suggested that the grand jury believed the parents either caused the death through abuse or neglect, or helped cover up what happened, even if they didn't directly cause the fatal injuries. The specific language of the indictment indicated that the grand jury believed the parents had either engaged in conduct that created a situation where their daughter was at risk, or that they had rendered assistance to someone who had committed a crime against her. This was significant because it suggested the grand jury believed there was probable cause to think the parents knew more than they had revealed and had taken actions to conceal the truth. The then District Attorney Alex Hunter made the controversial decision not to sign the indictment, effectively blocking any prosecution. Hunter cited insufficient evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal trial. He believed that while the grand jury had found probable cause for charges, which is a relatively low legal standard, the evidence wasn't strong enough to secure a conviction. The burden of proof for an indictment is much lower than the burden required for conviction. A grand jury only needs to find probable cause, meaning it's more likely than not that a crime occurred and the accused committed it. But for conviction, a prosecutor must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, a much higher standard that requires the jury to be firmly convinced of guilt with no reasonable alternative explanation. Hunter had to consider whether he could actually win the case in court against skilled defense attorneys with unlimited resources. The Ramseys had retained some of the best criminal defense attorneys in the country. They had experts lined up to dispute every piece of evidence. Hunter knew that a high-profile trial resulting in an acquittal would be devastating, not just for his career, but for the possibility of ever getting justice in the case. Hunter's decision remains one of the most controversial prosecutorial decisions in American criminal justice history, with many critics arguing that the case should have gone to trial, allowing a jury to evaluate all the evidence, including the disputed 911 audio. Critics pointed out that the whole purpose of a trial is to let a jury weigh evidence and make determinations about credibility and guilt. By refusing to sign the indictment, Hunter was essentially overriding the judgment of 12 citizens who had spent months examining the evidence in detail. Some saw this as an abuse of prosecutorial discretion, while others understood the practical realities of trying to win such a complex case. Let's talk about what investigators believe might have been happening in those 6 seconds after Patsy thought she had hung up. One theory, supported by some detectives who worked the case and later spoke publicly about their conclusions, suggests that the conversation captured was between family members discussing how to handle the situation they found themselves in. The phrase "we're not speaking to you," attributed to John's voice, could indicate tension or disagreement, possibly directed at Burke, telling him to be quiet or not to interfere with what the adults were doing. The tone suggested someone giving a firm directive, possibly to a child who was asking questions or trying to participate in the conversation. The question, "What did you find?" from a younger voice could suggest that Burke was asking about what his parents had discovered. Perhaps he was asking about the ransom note, or asking what was in the note, or asking about his sister's whereabouts. If this interpretation is accurate, it paints a picture of a family in crisis, having a conversation they believed was private, unaware that the phone line remained open and was still recording every word. It suggests that whatever had happened, all 3 family members who were awake were aware of it and discussing it in some way. The content of that conversation, even if we could determine the exact words with certainty, doesn't necessarily indicate guilt in the murder itself. Families in crisis have all kinds of conversations, make all kinds of decisions, some logical and some not. The presence of Burke during the 911 call doesn't prove he was involved in his sister's death. It doesn't prove his parents were involved either, but it does establish that the family's initial statements about who was awake and when were not entirely truthful, and that discrepancy is significant from an investigative standpoint. It raises questions about what else they might not have been truthful about and why they felt the need to hide Burke's presence. Another expert, Dr. Lawrence Kobylinski, a forensic scientist and professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York, one of the premier institutions for studying criminal justice and forensic science, reviewed the case years later. While not analyzing the audio specifically, Kobylinski commented on the significance of this type of evidence in cases where physical evidence is ambiguous or contaminated. He noted that behavioral evidence and statements become even more critical when forensic evidence is limited or disputed. Any inconsistency in a family's account raises red flags for investigators and can become a focal point of investigation, especially when other evidence is inconclusive. The audio also became a point of discussion in the context of various theories about Burke's potential involvement. Some theories about the case have suggested that Burke, then 9 years old, might have accidentally or intentionally caused his sister's injuries during a fight or accident, and that the parents discovered this and staged a cover-up to protect their son from prosecution and the destruction of their family. According to this theory, the parents might have created the ransom note as misdirection, staged elements of the crime scene to suggest an intruder, and coordinated their story to shift blame away from Burke and toward an imaginary foreign faction. The presence of Burke's voice on the 911 call, if confirmed beyond doubt, doesn't prove this theory, but it does establish that he was present and aware during those crucial moments when the parents were first reporting the kidnapping to authorities. It means he witnessed whatever happened between finding the ransom note and calling police, a period of approximately 30 minutes that might have included discussions about how to handle the situation, what to say, what not to say, and how to protect the family from scrutiny and investigation. It's essential to note that Burke Ramsey has never been charged with any crime related to his sister's death. He has always maintained his complete innocence and has expressed frustration and pain at being under suspicion for so many years. In fact, in 2008, the Boulder District Attorney's Office officially cleared the entire Ramsey family based on new DNA evidence that pointed to an unknown male whose genetic profile was found in multiple locations on JonBenét's clothing. The DA at that time, Mary Lacey, sent a public letter of apology to the Ramsey family, acknowledging the years of suspicion and media scrutiny they had endured, and stating that the new DNA evidence had convinced her of their innocence. Burke has filed and won substantial defamation lawsuits against media personalities and tabloids who suggested his involvement in his sister's death without sufficient evidence to support such serious accusations. He successfully sued CBS for a documentary that presented theories about his potential involvement, winning a settlement reported to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars, though the exact amount was kept confidential as part of the settlement agreement. He has consistently denied any knowledge of what happened to JonBenet and has expressed his own desire to see the case solved and the real perpetrator brought to justice. However, questions about the DNA evidence itself have persisted in forensic science circles. Some forensic experts have suggested that the DNA could be trace DNA from manufacturing or handling of clothing, not necessarily from the perpetrator who committed the crime. Modern forensic science has shown that DNA can be transferred in countless ways that don't involve direct contact during a crime. Clothing passes through many hands during manufacturing, shipping, and retail sale. Each person who touches an item can leave trace DNA that persists through washing and wear. The sample was extremely small, measured in picograms, and of limited quality, making definitive conclusions difficult. This means that while the DNA evidence provided some level of exoneration for the family, it didn't entirely resolve all questions about the case. Some investigators believe the DNA evidence is significant and points definitively to an intruder. Others believe it's inconclusive and could have innocent explanations unrelated to the crime. This disagreement among experts has perpetuated the debate about the case and prevented any consensus about what really happened. The 911 call and its aftermath also reveal something about the nature of modern criminal investigations and how technology evolves over time. In 1996, audio enhancement technology was relatively primitive compared to what exists today. The equipment and software used by the initial analysts were state-of-the-art for that time, representing the best technology available to law enforcement and forensic experts. But technology has advanced exponentially since then, with computing power increasing dramatically and new analytical techniques being developed. Audio enhancement techniques have advanced significantly since 1996. Computer algorithms can now analyze voice patterns with machine learning, filter out background noise using sophisticated digital signal processing, and isolate specific frequencies with greater accuracy than was possible nearly 3 decades ago. Machine learning and artificial intelligence have been applied to audio forensics, creating new possibilities for extracting information from degraded recordings. Neural networks can be trained to recognize patterns in audio that human analysts might miss. Some experts believe that modern technology could provide more definitive answers about what's on that recording. In 2016, the television series The Case of JonBenét Ramsey conducted a new analysis of the 911 audio using modern technology available 20 years after the original recording was made. This analysis, supervised by retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent James Fitzgerald, one of the Bureau's most respected profilers and investigators, and audio expert Ed Primo, once again concluded that 3 voices could be heard after Patsy attempted to hang up. Their interpretation of the words was slightly different from earlier analyses, with some variations in what they believed was being said, but the fundamental finding remained consistent. Someone else was in that room, someone whose presence hadn't been acknowledged in the initial statements to police. James Fitzgerald brought particular credibility to the analysis. He was a legendary FBI profiler who had worked on some of the Bureau's most challenging and high-profile cases, including helping to identify the Unabomber through linguistic analysis of his manifesto. His expertise in linguistic analysis and behavioral profiling added another dimension to the investigation. Fitzgerald didn't just listen to the audio as isolated sounds. He analyzed it in the context of everything else known about the case: the family dynamics, the ransom note, the crime scene evidence, and behavioral patterns of the family members. The show's producers arranged for Burke Ramsey to be confronted with this finding during his interview with Dr. Phil. According to the broadcast, when presented with the audio analysis and the expert conclusions, Burke acknowledged being awake but maintained he had nothing to do with his sister's death. He said he couldn't remember exactly what he might have said or done that morning, attributing his lack of clear memory to the traumatic nature of the day, the passage of time, and the fact that he was only 9 years old at the time. Memory from childhood, especially traumatic memory, is notoriously unreliable and subject to distortion over time. This acknowledgement, broadcast on television to millions of viewers around the world, finally put to rest any doubt about whether Burke was present during the 911 call. It confirmed what investigators had suspected for years based on the audio analysis. But it also highlighted the limitations of the audio evidence. Even with Burke admitting he was awake and present, we still don't know exactly what was said in those 6 seconds, what it meant, or what significance it might have for understanding what happened that night. Yet the question remains, why did the parents initially say Burke was asleep? There are several possible explanations, none of which necessarily indicate involvement in a crime. Parents might instinctively want to shield their child from a traumatic situation. They might have been trying to keep Burke out of the investigation to protect him from stress, media attention, and the intense scrutiny that would follow. 9-year-old children aren't typically considered reliable witnesses, and parents might reasonably want to keep their son away from police interrogations, media circuses, and the psychological trauma of being involved in a murder investigation. In the chaos of those early hours, with police arriving, friends being called over, and the house filling with people and activity, they might have simply misremembered who was where and when. Memory under extreme stress is notoriously unreliable. Studies in cognitive psychology have shown that traumatic events can significantly distort memory, causing people to remember things that didn't happen or forget things that did. The Ramseys were in shock, dealing with the worst nightmare any parent can imagine, operating on adrenaline and terror. Alternatively, as some investigators have suggested, there might have been a more deliberate reason for excluding Burke from the initial narrative. If something happened involving Burke, even accidentally, the parents might have been trying to control the story from the very beginning. They might have made quick decisions in those first hours about what to say and what not to say, decisions that would later come back to haunt them as inconsistencies emerged and investigators began to question their credibility. The dispatcher who took that call, Kim Archuleta, later gave interviews about her experience that morning. She recalled Patsy's voice as genuinely panicked and distressed. Archuleta had years of experience taking emergency calls, handling everything from medical emergencies to violent crimes, and she had developed an ear for distinguishing real emergencies from false reports or exaggerated situations. To her trained judgment, this was a mother in real crisis, experiencing authentic panic and fear. She heard no indication that Patsy was acting or fabricating the emergency. The emotional distress was real and unmistakable. However, Archuleta also noted that she didn't hear the conversation that allegedly took place after Patsy hung up. From her position at the dispatch center, the call simply ended when Patsy put down the phone. The recording equipment captured those additional seconds, but Archuleta herself wasn't aware of them at the time. She had no way of knowing that crucial evidence was still being recorded after she thought the call had terminated. It was only later, when detectives reviewed the tape as part of their investigation, that anyone noticed the sounds after the apparent disconnect and decided to enhance and analyze those final seconds. This raises an interesting point about evidence and investigation. Sometimes the most crucial pieces of evidence aren't immediately apparent. They're discovered later, upon review, when someone thinks to look more carefully or use different technology or asks questions that nobody thought to ask initially. The post-call audio wasn't initially considered significant. It was only when investigators began scrutinizing every detail of the case, listening to the recording multiple times with fresh ears, that someone noticed the sounds after the apparent disconnect and decided they might be important enough to warrant detailed forensic analysis. The legal implications of the 911 audio have been debated extensively by legal scholars, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and experts in evidence law who have studied the case. Could it have been used as evidence in a trial? The answer is complex and depends on numerous factors, including how it was collected, how it was analyzed, how it would be presented, and what legal standards the court would apply. Audio evidence of this nature is generally admissible in criminal trials under the rules of evidence, but its weight depends heavily on how it's presented and how effectively it can be challenged by the defense. The prosecution would need to establish a clear chain of custody for the recording, demonstrating that it hadn't been tampered with, altered, or contaminated in any way from the moment it was created until it was presented in court. They would need to demonstrate that the enhancement techniques used were scientifically valid and generally accepted in the relevant scientific community, meeting what's known as the Dober standard for scientific evidence. They would need experts to testify about what they heard, explaining their methodology and the basis for their conclusions in ways that a jury of lay people could understand and evaluate without being misled or confused by technical jargon. The defense would undoubtedly bring their own experts to dispute every finding and challenge every conclusion. They would challenge the enhancement techniques, arguing that the process itself created artifacts or distortions that weren't present in the original recording. They would present alternative interpretations of the sounds, suggesting that what prosecutors claimed were words might actually be background noise, house sounds, audio interference, or random acoustic phenomena. They would emphasize the subjective nature of audio interpretation and the lack of scientific consensus about these techniques, pointing to disagreements within the forensic science community. In cases where audio evidence is ambiguous and experts disagree, juries are often instructed to give it limited weight and to consider it alongside all other evidence in the case. The standard in criminal cases is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest burden of proof in the American legal system. If experts disagree about what's on a recording, if there are multiple plausible interpretations, if reasonable minds can differ about what's being said, that creates reasonable doubt. A single juror with reasonable doubt can prevent a conviction, leading to a hung jury or acquittal. This is likely one of the reasons District Attorney Hunter chose not to prosecute despite the grand jury indictment. He may have concluded that the audio evidence, while interesting and suggestive, wasn't strong enough to secure a conviction when weighed against all the challenges the defense would raise. He would have known that a high-profile trial resulting in an acquittal might prevent any future prosecution even if better evidence emerged later, due to double jeopardy protections in the Constitution that prevent someone from being tried twice for the same crime. Prosecutors sometimes make strategic decisions not to bring charges when they believe they can't win, even if they personally believe a crime occurred and know who committed it. The 911 call also became a point of public fascination and amateur investigation, particularly as the internet grew and true crime communities flourished online. When excerpts were played on television programs and posted online, people listened with their own ears, forming their own opinions about what they heard. True crime forums exploded with debate, with people posting detailed analyses, creating enhanced versions of their own using consumer software, and arguing passionately about interpretations. Online communities dedicated thousands of hours to dissecting those 6 seconds. Some listeners claimed they could clearly hear all 3 voices and make out the words exactly as the experts described. Others heard nothing but static and muffled noise, arguing that people were hearing what they wanted to hear, finding patterns in randomness because they were primed to expect certain words. This phenomenon illustrates how subjective audio interpretation can be, especially in poor quality recordings. It's similar to how people can look at abstract images or ink blots and see different things, or how witnesses to the same event can give wildly different accounts based on their perspective and expectations. Psychologically, the case also raises important questions about memory and trauma. The Ramsey family went through an unimaginable ordeal that morning and in the years that followed. The stress, shock, and trauma of discovering a child missing, then finding her deceased in their own home hours later, followed by years of intense media scrutiny and public suspicion, could easily affect memory and perception. Research in trauma psychology has shown that extreme stress can fragment memory, causing some details to be remembered with crystal clarity, while others are completely lost or distorted beyond recognition. It's possible that in the chaos of that morning, details became confused or misremembered not through any deliberate deception, but simply because human memory under extreme stress is fallible and subject to error. This doesn't excuse inconsistencies in statements to police, but it provides important context for understanding why accounts might shift or contain errors over time. Investigators are trained to look for these inconsistencies because they can indicate deception, but they're also supposed to consider the circumstances under which statements were made and account for the effects of trauma on memory. What do you think those 6 seconds captured? Do you believe the audio experts who claim to hear 3 voices and specific words? Or do you think the recording is too degraded to draw any conclusions? Could modern artificial intelligence and machine learning finally decode what was said with greater accuracy than human analysts working with older technology? Drop your theory in the comments below. This case has puzzled investigators and true crime followers for nearly 30 years, and your perspective might offer an insight others haven't considered. And if you found this investigation valuable and want to see more deep dives into cases that continue to haunt us, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. We bring you detailed analysis, the latest updates, and respectful coverage of the cases that refuse to be forgotten. Like this video to help us reach more people interested in true crime investigation and help support the channel. What case should we examine next? Let us know in the comments, and remember to share this video with anyone interested in unsolved mysteries and criminal justice. These stories matter. These victims deserve to be remembered. And justice, even delayed, is always worth pursuing.